Hello everyone, this video tells the story of a visionary girlfriend cheating on him with a swindler. She was prosecuted from she dark deeps, and after being released from prison. It's a really crazy story. Your opinion in the comments. Enjoy your wagon.
My girlfriend cheated on me with a swindler for his dark deeds. She was brought to justice after getting out of prison she came to me with. I've been married to Emily for 8 years, and I thought I knew everything about her. Emily, with her infectious laughter and bright personality, was the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. She worked as a graphic designer for a local advertising agency, and her creative spirit always filled our home with vibrant energy. I, on the other hand, am more reserved. My name is David, and I work as a software developer. Our lives seemed perfectly synchronized until a series of unexpected events began to unravel the fabric of our marriage. It all started when Emily began working late more frequently. At first, I didn't think much of it. The advertising world is demanding, and I assumed she was just putting in extra hours to meet deadlines. But soon, her late nights became a regular occurrence. She assured me that it was just a busy period at work, and I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We had always trusted each other implicitly. One Friday evening, Emily came home unusually late. Her eyes were slightly bloodshot, and she smelled faintly of alcohol. I was surprised, but didn't question her. She explained that her team had gone out for drinks to celebrate the completion of a major project. I nodded, accepting her explanation without suspicion. After all, she had never given me a reason to doubt her. But then, small things started to bother me. She was always on her phone, smiling at messages she wouldn't share with me. Her laughter, once so open and free, now seemed secretive. One night, as she showered, her phone buzzed incessantly. I glanced at the screen and saw a name I didn't recognize, Alex. The message preview read, "Can't wait to see you again." My heart sank. Who was Alex? I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself it was probably a colleague or a friend I hadn't met. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew rapidly, consuming my thoughts. The following weekend, Emily said she was going on a business trip. It wasn't unusual for her to travel for work, but something felt off. She was overly excited, almost giddy about the trip. I decided to check her emails for any clues. It was a violation of privacy, something I had never done before, but my instincts screamed that something was wrong. In her emails, I found a booking confirmation for a weekend at a luxury hotel in the city. The reservation was for 2 people. My heart pounded as I read the details. This was no business trip. Emily was planning a romantic getaway. But with whom? I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. I needed to know the truth. So I decided to follow her. I called in sick at work and tailed her to the hotel. My hands shook as I watched her check in with a man I had never seen before. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident demeanor. They laughed and held hands as they walked to the elevator. I felt sick to my stomach. How could she do this to me? To us? I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I was paralyzed with shock. Instead, I went home and waited, my mind racing with possibilities. When she returned, she was all smiles, acting as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bring myself to confront her right then. I needed time to think. Over the next few days, I started gathering evidence. I installed a tracking app on her phone and monitored her messages. The more I uncovered, the more devastated I became. She had been seeing this man, Alex, for months. They exchanged intimate messages and photos, and they had met several times. Each new revelation was like a dagger to my heart. I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I confided in my best friend, Mark. He was shocked and urged me to confront her. But how could I? I loved her, despite everything. I needed to understand why she did this. Was it something I had done, or was she just unhappy in our marriage? One evening, as we sat down for dinner, I finally found the courage to bring it up. I told her I knew about Alex. Her face went pale, and for a moment she was silent. Then tears welled up in her eyes, and she started to cry. She admitted everything. She said she had felt neglected and unappreciated, that Alex made her feel alive again. It was a cliché, but hearing it from her was excruciating. I asked her if she wanted to leave me for him. She shook her head and said she didn't know. She was confused and lost, and she didn't know what she wanted. We sat there in silence, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavily between us. In the following weeks, we tried to salvage our marriage. We went to counseling, but the trust was shattered. Every time she was late, every time she smiled at her phone, my mind would spiral into dark places. I became paranoid and bitter, and it took a toll on both of us. One day, as I was going through her messages again, I found something that broke me completely. She was still in contact with Alex. Despite everything, she hadn't cut him off. I felt like a fool for believing she could change, that we could move past this. I confronted her again, and this time there were no tears, no apologies. She was cold and distant, and I realized then that our marriage was over. She packed her things and left that night. As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The next few months were a blur. I threw myself into work trying to escape the pain. Friends and family tried to support me, but I felt hollow inside. I missed her terribly, despite everything. I missed the life we had, the future we had planned. One evening I received a call from Mark. He sounded urgent and told me to come over. When I arrived, he handed me a newspaper. The headline read, "Local woman arrested in embezzlement scandal." I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Emily. She had been involved in a scheme at her company, siphoning funds into a personal account. Alex, it turned out, was her accomplice. They had been planning to run away together, but their plan had fallen apart when their boss discovered discrepancies in the accounts. I felt a strange sense of vindication. Her betrayal had extended far beyond our marriage. She had deceived everyone around her. As I read the article, I realized that I had been mourning someone who never truly existed. The Emily I loved was a facade, a mask worn by a woman who could lie and cheat without remorse. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild my life. I moved to a new apartment, far away from the memories of our life together. I focused on my work, on my friends, and on finding peace within myself. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the pain felt unbearable. But slowly, I began to heal. Emily, however, was not done with me. From prison, she started a campaign to turn my life upside down. She blamed me for everything: her arrest, her failed plans with Alex, and even her infidelity. She told her friends and family that I had driven her to desperation, that my neglect and emotional abuse had pushed her into Alex's arms and into committing embezzlement. The worst part was that some people believed her. I began receiving accusatory messages from mutual friends, and my social media was flooded with hateful comments. My reputation took a nosedive, and I felt isolated and misunderstood. In the midst of all this chaos, I met Sarah. Sarah was a bright, compassionate woman who worked in the same office building as I did. We had often exchanged pleasantries in the elevator, but I had never seen her beyond that. One day, she found me sitting alone in the building's cafe, looking utterly defeated. She approached me and asked if everything was all right. There was something in her eyes, a genuine concern, that made me open up to her. We started talking, and I found solace in her presence. She listened without judgment and offered me a friendship that I desperately needed. Over time, our friendship blossomed into something more. Sarah became my anchor, helping me navigate through the storm that Emily had created. Meanwhile, Emily's accusations continued to cause problems. She filed for divorce, demanding half of everything, despite the fact that she was in prison for a crime she committed. Her lawyers argued that I had emotionally neglected her, leading to her actions. It was a nightmare. I had to spend a significant amount of money on legal fees to defend myself, all while trying to maintain my sanity and my job. Sarah stood by me through it all. She was my rock, providing emotional support and helping me see the light at the end of the tunnel. Her kindness and patience were in stark contrast to the chaos Emily had brought into my life. Slowly, I began to see a future with Sarah, one that was free from the shadows of my past. One day, as I was preparing for another court hearing, I received a call from my lawyer. He had found evidence that could exonerate me completely. It turned out that Emily had been involved in shady dealings long before she met Alex. Her financial records showed a pattern of embezzlement and deceit that predated our marriage. This evidence was a game changer. At the hearing, my lawyer presented the evidence, and the judge was convinced. Emily's accusations were dismissed, and I was cleared of any wrongdoing. It was a huge relief, but the damage to my reputation had already been done. I knew it would take time to rebuild my life completely, but at least I could now move forward without the burden of false accusations. With Emily out of the picture, Sarah and I began to build a life together. We moved in together, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. She brought a light into my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. Her unwavering support helped me heal and regain my confidence. One evening, as we were enjoying a quiet dinner at home, Sarah suggested we take a trip together. It was something I had been hesitant about, given everything that had happened, but she insisted it would be good for us. We decided to visit a small coastal town, far away from the memories of the past year. The trip was exactly what I needed. Walking along the beach, with the sound of the waves and the feeling of Sarah's hand in mine, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. We talked about our future, our dreams, and our hopes. For the first time, I felt like I could truly leave the past behind and embrace a new beginning. But life, it seemed, had one more twist in store for me. On our last day in the coastal town, we ran into Alex. He looked different, tired, haggard, and far from the confident man I had seen with Emily. He was alone, and when he saw us, his face paled. I felt a surge of anger, but Sarah squeezed my hand, grounding me. Alex approached us, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. He told us that he had been on the run ever since Emily's arrest, living a life of fear and regret. He wanted to apologize, to make amends for everything that had happened. I listened, not because I wanted to forgive him, but because I needed closure. He explained that Emily had manipulated him too, promising him a future that was built on lies. He had lost everything, his job, his family, his peace of mind. Seeing him like that, broken and remorseful, I realized that holding on to my anger would only continue to hurt me. I told him that while I could never forget what he and Emily had done, I was ready to move on. He nodded, thanked me, and walked away. As he disappeared into the distance, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Sarah and I returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. We knew that life would always have its challenges, but we were ready to face them together. Emily's actions had taught me a lot about trust, love, and resilience. I had lost so much, but I had also gained something invaluable, a deeper understanding of myself and what it meant to truly love and be loved. In the end, Emily's betrayal was not the end of my story. It was just a painful chapter that I had to endure to find my true path. With Sarah by my side, I knew that the future held endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all. With Emily's shadow receding into the past, Sarah and I began to build a new life together. Sarah's unwavering support had seen me through the darkest period of my life, and I was determined to repay her by making our future as bright as possible. Our relationship deepened, and it wasn't long before I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. One sunny afternoon, while we were picnicking in a park overlooking the city, I decided to propose. I had been planning it for weeks, and everything had to be perfect. As we sat on the blanket, laughing and enjoying the day, I pulled out a small box from my pocket. Her eyes widened in surprise as I opened it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "you've been my rock, my source of joy, and my hope for the future. Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded vigorously before managing to say, "Yes, David, 1,000 times yes." The months that followed were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. We decided on a small, intimate ceremony with only our closest friends and family. It was held at a charming countryside estate, surrounded by lush gardens and blooming flowers. The day was perfect. Sarah looked radiant in her wedding dress, and as I stood at the altar watching her walk down the aisle, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. Our vows were heartfelt and tearful, promising to support and cherish each other through all of life's ups and downs. As we exchanged rings and sealed our vows with a kiss, I knew that this was the start of a beautiful new chapter in our lives. Our honeymoon was a dream come true. We traveled to Europe, exploring romantic cities like Paris, Venice, and Prague. We walked hand in hand along the Seine, enjoyed gondola rides through the Venetian canals, and marveled at the stunning architecture in Prague. It was a magical time, filled with love and laughter, and it cemented our bond even further. Upon returning home, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. We both continued with our careers, finding joy in our work and each other. But the biggest surprise came a few months later when Sarah announced that she was pregnant. The news filled me with a sense of awe and excitement. We were going to be parents, The pregnancy was a joyous time for us. We spent hours discussing baby names, decorating the nursery, and dreaming about our future as a family. Every ultrasound, every kick, and every moment brought us closer together. I was there for Sarah every step of the way, attending prenatal classes and making sure she was comfortable and happy. But just as we were beginning to feel that our lives were finally on track, a dark cloud loomed on the horizon. Emily, who was still behind bars, seemed to have an uncanny ability to disrupt our peace. It started with letters, filled with venomous accusations and threats. She blamed me for everything: her arrest, her failed plans with Alex, and even her infidelity. The letters were disturbing, but I tried to ignore them, focusing on the positive changes in my life. Emily's parents, however, were not so easily dismissed. They had always been a significant presence in our lives, but their allegiance to their daughter turned them against me. They believed Emily's lies and took it upon themselves to make my life as difficult as possible. They spread rumors about me, attempting to tarnish my reputation at work and within our social circles. They even tried to contact Sarah, attempting to turn her against me. Sarah, bless her heart, stood by me through it all. She knew the truth and refused to be swayed by their manipulations. But the stress began to take its toll, particularly as we were preparing for the arrival of our baby. The constant harassment from Emily's parents became unbearable. One evening, after a particularly distressing phone call from Emily's mother, I decided enough was enough. We needed to take legal action to protect our family. I contacted my lawyer, who advised us to file a restraining order against Emily's parents. It was a difficult decision, but it was necessary for our peace of mind and the safety of our unborn child. The court proceedings were exhausting. Emily's parents tried to paint me as the villain, but the evidence of their harassment was overwhelming. The judge granted the restraining order, and for the first time in months, we felt a sense of relief. But Emily wasn't done. From prison, she managed to convince a fellow inmate to contact us, pretending to be someone from a support group offering to mediate and reconcile our differences. It was a clever ruse, designed to gain our trust and manipulate us further. Fortunately, Sarah's intuition saved us from falling into the trap. She sensed something was off and insisted we investigate before engaging with the so-called mediator. When we uncovered the truth, I was furious. Emily's relentless pursuit of revenge was putting our family at risk. I consulted with my lawyer again, who suggested we move to a different city to start fresh. It was a drastic step, but one that seemed necessary to escape Emily's reach. Sarah and I discussed it at length. Moving would mean leaving behind our friends, our jobs, and the life we had built. But the safety and well-being of our baby were our top priority. We decided to take the plunge. We found a beautiful house in a quiet town several hours away. It was perfect a safe haven where we could raise our child without fear of harassment. We both found new jobs, and slowly but surely, we began to rebuild our lives. As Sarah's due date approached, we focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. We attended childbirth classes, set up the nursery, and read every parenting book we could get our hands on. The anticipation was exhilarating. Finally, the day arrived. Sarah went into labor in the early hours of the morning. We rushed to the hospital, our hearts pounding with excitement and nervousness. The labor was long and arduous, but Sarah was incredible. Her strength and determination left me in awe. At 3:42 p.m., our son Ethan was born. Holding him in my arms for the first time, I felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. He was perfect, a tiny bundle of joy who had already brought so much happiness into our lives. The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and endless feedings. But despite the exhaustion, Sarah and I were happier than ever. Ethan was a blessing, a symbol of our love and resilience. However, Emily's influence continued to cast a shadow over our happiness. Despite the restraining order and our move, she found ways to disrupt our lives. She managed to leak false stories to the media, portraying herself as a wronged woman and me as the villain. The tabloids ate it up, and soon our quiet town was buzzing with gossip. It was frustrating and disheartening, but Sarah and I remained united. We refused to let Emily's lies destroy our happiness. We focused on our family, on providing a loving and stable environment for Ethan. One day, as I was playing with Ethan in the park, I noticed a familiar face watching us from a distance. It was Emily's mother. My heart raced with anxiety. How had she found us? I immediately called Sarah and told her to stay home and lock the doors. Then I confronted Emily's mother. She was defiant, insisting that she had every right to see her grandson. I reminded her of the restraining order and threatened to call the police. She scoffed and walked away, but I knew this wasn't the end. That evening, Sarah and I decided it was time to take more drastic measures. We hired a private investigator to gather evidence against Emily and her parents. We needed to build a solid case to ensure they couldn't harass us any longer. The investigator uncovered a web of deceit and manipulation. Emily had been using her connections to orchestrate a campaign against us from prison. Her parents were complicit, providing her with information and resources. With this evidence, we went back to court. The judge was appalled by the extent of Emily's and her parents' actions. They were issued a stern warning, and Emily's privileges in prison were revoked. Her parents were fined and warned that any further contact would result in severe penalties. For the first time in years, we felt a sense of true freedom. Emily's influence was finally waning, and we could focus on our lives without fear of interference. Sarah and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony, reaffirming our commitment to each other and our family. Ethan grew quickly, filling our lives with laughter and joy. We watched his first steps, heard his first words, and celebrated every milestone with immense pride. Our love for each other and our son only grew stronger with each passing day. As the years went by, the memories of Emily's betrayal and harassment faded. We remained vigilant, but we refused to let fear control our lives. We created a beautiful, happy home for Ethan, filled with love and security. One day, as I was playing with Ethan in the backyard, Sarah came out with a worried expression on her face. She handed me her phone, which displayed a news article. Emily had been released from prison on good behavior. My heart sank. How could the justice system fail us like this? The next few weeks were tense. We fortified our home, installed security cameras, and made sure to always be vigilant. We didn't tell Ethan much, just enough to keep him aware of strangers. But despite our precautions, the unease lingered. Then, one fateful night, our worst fears came true. I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I heard a noise at the front door. Sarah was upstairs putting Ethan to bed. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. My blood ran cold. Emily stood there looking disheveled and holding a gun. My heart pounded in my chest. I quickly locked the door and called out to Sarah, telling her to stay upstairs and call the police. "David, open the door," Emily demanded, her voice filled with desperation and anger. "We need to talk. Emily, put the gun down. We can talk through the door," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I just want to see my son," she cried. "You took everything from me." The seconds felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. Emily continued to pound on the door, her threats growing more frantic. I could hear Ethan crying upstairs, and it broke my heart. Finally, the police arrived. They ordered Emily to drop the weapon and step away from the door. There was a tense standoff, but eventually she complied. The officers handcuffed her and led her away, her screams echoing through the night. In the days that followed, we took further legal action to ensure Emily would never come near us again. The courts imposed a lifetime restraining order, and she was sent back to prison for violating her parole. It was a terrifying experience, but we were grateful that no one was hurt. Sarah and I knew that we had to be strong for Ethan. We sought therapy to help us process the trauma and ensure that our son grew up in a safe and loving environment. We leaned on each other more than ever, finding strength in our unity and love. As the years passed, we continued to build a beautiful life together. We watched Ethan grow into a kind, intelligent, and resilient young man. We traveled, made new memories, and cherished every moment we had as a family. Despite the shadows of the past, we refused to let them define us. Our love for each other and our determination to protect our family guided us through the darkest times. We learned that true happiness comes from within, and that together we could overcome any obstacle. Looking back, I realized that the trials we faced had only made us stronger. Emily's actions, though painful, had led me to Sarah and the family I had always dreamed of. Our journey was fraught with challenges, but it also brought us incredible joy and fulfillment. And so, as I stood on the porch of our home, watching Ethan play in the yard and feeling Sarah's hand in mine, I knew that we had finally found our happily ever after.
Hello, is really crazy story. What is it? Write comment, put like and subscribe to channel, Instagram and Discord. Good luck!